Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Bryce Conlan. Bryce, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
It is my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm happy to. My name is Bryce Conlan. I am an entrepreneur. I have been my entire career, and I have had some really good wins. I've had some really tragic, catastrophic failures. And now I'm on a mission to help leaders level up their leadership so that they can straight up miss the landmines and the bear traps that I ran headlong into. So that's what I do these days.
Well, I've heard the phrase, you learn more by losing than you do by winning. So did you want to go into that story that you referred to regarding, let's just be straight and get to the real stuff?
Yeah. So it's a long story, and I'll give you the abbreviated version, and we can unpack it if there's interest. I started a business right out of college. I went to school. I graduated in 2008, which for those who were around then know that was not a great time to graduate from university. There wasn't a lot of hiring going on. And so I made the decision to move into entrepreneurship, mostly out of necessity. I got lucky, candidly, because it was right around the time, 2008, there was a new camera technology that had just come out, and it made HD video, which now seems ubiquitous, so we all carry it around in our pocket, but it was new at the time. And YouTube, for perspective, was 3 years old. That was it. It was only 3 years old in 2008. And I saw this massive opportunity in video. And so I bought a camera. I learned how to use it because I didn't know, and started making films for small restaurants in our neighborhood. Basically, just I'd go in, I'd shoot, show the food, show the chefs, show the environment, and then we'd put it up on YouTube. And in those days, if you put anything up on YouTube, it immediately was like, it got attention and it got eyeballs. And so it was really good business for these restaurants. Well, it didn't take long for a national restaurant company to see the work I was doing and recruit me in. And so I went corporate, and I didn't last very long in corporate. As most entrepreneurs can attest, there are some people who are just unemployable, and they tend to be entrepreneurs. And anyway, but very quickly after that, even after I left corporate, I said, this is the business that I'm going to stay in for a while, and built it up. And within a year, we went from working with tiny, just like restaurants on the corner, to working with large multinational organizations. And we were doing really big projects. And so I needed a team to support. And so I did. I went and hired that team. I brought on some co-founders. Everything was going really great. Year one, we cleared 6 figures with no outside money, which is great. Year two, we doubled our revenue, which is amazing. It almost never happens. Year three, we doubled again. And by the end of year three, we were almost out of business. And the entire thing was hinged on, honestly, just me as a leader, as the guy who was steering the ship, not knowing how to engage the people around me, not realizing that I was hurting people, that I was creating a toxic work environment. And I had a great team, and they all walked out the door for better opportunities or different opportunities, simply because they didn't want to work with me anymore. And that's
a lot
hard
of
lesson to
questions
learn.
there that I've got.
Yeah.
So
go for it.
I mean, the growth is pretty much as anyone would take that kind of growth, I would say. So are you also, would you make yourself responsible for the growth as much as the, should we say, the third year?
Yeah, actually, I've told this story a lot. Nobody's ever pointed that out, but yes, the growth was as a direct result of the work that really, truly that I was doing in kind of business development. I had some great relationships, and what I know now is that I'm especially good at building deep relationships quickly in a one-on-one setting. And so in business to business sales, that's a lot of what it is. It's sitting down with one person or 2 people and having just a normal conversation, and it turns into an exploration of how can we work together? And before you know it, you're on retainer to do X number of projects a year. And so it was a lot of luck. I'm not going to take credit for everything, but the growth, yes, I was in the driver's seat on that too. And you're right. I shouldn't minimize that. Why would I?
Well, I also wanted to pick up on one thing, which you said, when the YouTube videos were getting attention, you went corporate. Does that mean that you went into employment?
I did.
Okay.
I
And
did.
what was the story there?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to understanding who you are, what drives you, your motivations, your fears, right? And my parents are teachers. And as teachers, they've had a good life, but it's a very safe life in a lot of regards, right? You know, if you're employed as a teacher, you know where your paycheck is coming from. It's coming from the school system that you work for. That's just a truth. That's a fact. There's still a teachers union. A lot of teachers in this country anyway, a lot of teachers actually still receive a pension in this country, which is incredibly unusual in the United States. There's not a lot of pensioned jobs anymore. And so the message that was kind of repeated to me for my entire upbringing was go and get a stable job that pays your bills. And so here I saw entrepreneurship as a plan B. You know, that was the fallback plan. I'm an entrepreneur because I can't get a job. Versus the reverse, whereas I'm choosing to go and build something from nothing in the service of others. I didn't really see that as a viable option. Now I do, of course. But yeah, so I think that when the opportunity presented itself and there was an offer on the table for a steady paycheck where I didn't have to, like, my ability to eat did not come from my ability to perform. All of the talk from my upbringing came back and said, yes, say yes, this is a good thing. This is safe and secure. And I learned later that that's not really true at all.
So what happened? How long did that last, and how did it end?
End to end, it was about 18 months.
Well, that's not too bad.
No,
it was you were going to say after 6 weeks you'd had enough.
Well, I had after 6 weeks, I'd had enough, but I wasn't sure how to get back to the entrepreneurial life because I had told everybody, all of my prospects, that it was no longer available. I told everybody that I was courting, that I'm working for the man now, I'm not available. And so they went and found someone else to do the work. Well, where's that leave me now? I'm starting literally from scratch. Newly married, we have an apartment. I'm trying to prove myself in this relationship that I am a good pick as a spouse, all these weird social pressures. And no, but I really had it was 9 weeks. And I remember sitting in my little gray cubicle after like the balloons had stopped and people stopped coming by to introduce themselves and all I kind of settled into a routine. And it was a Wednesday morning, my gray little cube under flickering green fluorescent lights. And I was like, what am I doing here? This is not me. Yeah. But again, 18 months is how long it took. The way that it ended was I was looking for an exit, and it just so happened that 2 departments were merged within the company. The department that I was in, the marketing team, was merged with kind of a strategy group. And in the merger, budgets were cut, people were let go, and I was on the chopping block. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean it, is I sat down on a Friday afternoon in the big conference boardroom with the creative director, and he said, well, there's no easy way to say it. And I had to fight back the smile because I knew what was coming. And I was so delighted because now I had to get into entrepreneurship again. There was no plan B. The course was set and someone else had made the hard decision for me. So best thing that ever happened to me.
Do you make that person feel better, or did you let them mull in it for a while?
I let them mull in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, It's funny though. I did catch up with this individual at the beginning of the pandemic, and it just goes to show you that relationships matter, right, in business. And so I caught up with this guy, and it had been a few years, and he now was in that very same situation where he had been laid off by his employer. And I reached out and just said, "Hey, I know what you're going through. Hit me up if you want to talk." And he did. He called me and he said, of all the people, he said, first of all, almost nobody reached out. Almost nobody reached out. And of all the people who did, you're the last person who should want to be kind to me after what I did to you. And that was such an interesting thing too, because it's like, dude, it wasn't personal. Like, your boss told you what you needed to do and you did it. Like, it wasn't personal. It was just business. And so we've actually rekindled that relationship, and we have a really good one now. So yeah, it just goes a long way. Like, don't burn your bridges. You never know. You never know when people are going to pop up later down the line.
So do you go pretty much immediately into that business you were referring to, or what happens when in day one when you don't have a job anymore?
Yeah. So our situation was um kind of like the scene out of a bad comedy film, right? If you can imagine this. So it was a Friday. I find out that I'm being let go. They give me 3 or 4 weeks to stay on the company payroll while I kind of get my affairs in order, and I appreciate that. By the way, I still work with this company. Like, we have a great relationship to this day. So again, don't burn your bridges. Like, exit gracefully. And and so I come home. It's a Friday, and I'm carrying kind of, while I'm happy that I'm not there anymore, I'm also carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, because my wife and I had bought a house, and it was a total like handyman special, total fixer upper, and we had torn it down to the studs. And so literally the day that I got home, we didn't have any walls up in our bedroom. It was studs. The plumbing was incomplete in the bathroom. That was a work in progress. And there were just like all these big, expensive projects looming. So I'm carrying all of this, and I walk through the front door, and I say to my wife, I said, "Listen, there's something that I need to tell you." And she says, "Me too." And I say, "Okay." And I'm getting ready to drop the bomb to tell her, like, I lost my job. And she goes, "I'm pregnant." And it's like one of those moments where you're like, what? Like, the conflicted feelings, like, I want to be happy about this, but I'm not really right now in this moment, because I have this big weighty thing laying on me. And so she says, "I'm pregnant, I'm expecting." And I'm like in shock. And then she says, "So what was that thing that you wanted to talk to me about?" And it's like, you know what? It can wait a couple of days. And so I had 30 days after, I found out that I was going to be let go. It was February 1st, 2014 was the day. That was the last day that I was formally employed. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I filed unemployment, and my plan was to go and get another job, honestly. Even though, because again, this is the lack of self-awareness for me as an entrepreneur, as a leader. I still didn't get it, that I was not made for corporate life. I believed that if I wasn't happy in one job, it was because there was a problem with the job. I should just go find a different job and it'll be fine. I'll be happy there. And that's a myth, because that's not me, as I'm built differently. And I needed to lean into that. I needed to just be who I was, but that was a hard thing for me to do. So my plan was to go and get another job. It happened that some freelance work came along, and one thing led to another. And like I said, in 2014, I had no plan. And by the end of 2015, we had a 6-figure business. And that's just how it went. It was just kind of like, okay, it's a thing now. So yeah, but it's the journey. It's kind of you never really know where it's going to take you. You're just on the journey. And it took me a long time to embrace the idea of, I'm a builder, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm comfortable with those risks, even though I wasn't raised to be, even though my parents aren't, even though it felt like I was somehow disappointing people and letting them down by not getting a stable job, by not having a job with a pension, by not becoming a post carrier like my grandfather or a teacher like my dad. I felt like I was disappointing people. And that took a long time to get over that and just say, no, this is who I am. And it's not for everybody, but it is for me.
Well done for realizing, at least. I did want to ask you about the growth, because although there's probably a lot of lessons in the failure of it, there's also most likely a lot of lessons in how you grew that company so quickly. So I know you touched upon the relationship building and the sales. Would you say it's predominantly down to that, or was there some other lessons
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah, absolutely. We never ran, at the end, we ran some marketing, very small campaigns, traditional, whether it's digital or print or, the mailers or whatever. But for us, it was all about relationships. And what I learned, and maybe this is the most significant takeaway from the growth, is the longer you stay in the game, the more you grow naturally. And here's why. It's a really interesting thing. People aren't staying at jobs as long anymore. So if I go and do a job with company A, and we do a project together, I'm likely going to meet 5 or 6 or 7 people at company A in the process. But those people aren't going to stay there forever. They're going to move off and they'll go to company B and C and X, Y, Z, and they're going to progress their careers. And as they do, you now have these strategic footholds into all these other companies where you didn't before because you have an ally. And what I learned is that the longer you stay in the game, the more of those connections get made. And the other vendors who are out there, the freelancers, they'll take jobs or they'll get out of the business. And so suddenly all that work that was going to other people finds its way to you. And so it really was just a function of building great relationships. And our premise was never to try to sell anything, to be honest. We were just there to get to know people. And in the process of just getting curious and asking questions, like, hey, so what are you working on? How are you going to do that? Gosh, that sounds really stressful. How are you handling that? People would surface these really interesting problems that we were uniquely positioned to solve. We're like, oh, I didn't know you had that project on your docket. I've actually done a project just like that for another client. I'll send the files over to you so you can take a look at them. Would you like to know more about that? And suddenly you're solving these problems for people with their guard down. You're not trying to sell into their organization. You're just helping out a friend. And in the process of helping out friends, some really amazing things have happened. Our clients have set our rates for us. That's an amazing thing, right? So I had an issue. I've never been good at pricing my work. I've always undervalued it, to be completely honest. I think it's a common problem. And my clients have raised my rates for me. Like literally, I've had the phone calls and emails where they're like, hey, so you undercharged us for this project. I want you to triple it and send it back. And you're like, wow, okay. We've had situations where projects have gone catastrophically wrong. But because we're working with friends, we're not vendors, we're not partners, we're just friends. We show up and talk about it honestly. Okay, listen, I really blew that. We totally dropped the ball on that. I love working with you. I'll give you all your money back. I'll do whatever I need to do. How can I fix this? And as friends, you collaborate, you solve it through, and they hire you again because that's rare. It's hard to come by. You don't see that very often. And so 100% of our business growth was just relationships. And that's all it was. And the key, I think, was again, showing up to these conversations authentically as a real human being and not someone with an ulterior motive, not someone who's trying to get to yes, who's trying to close a deal. That wasn't me. It was showing up authentically and finding ways to encourage other people to do the same, to show up as real humans, drop the guard. We're talking about you. We're not talking about your business. I'm not talking about that project. I'm not here for that project. I'm here for you. Tell me about that Iron Man you're training for. Tell me about those golf lessons that you just signed up for. Tell me about your vacation to the Barbados. And suddenly you're talking to people, and people want to spend more time with people that they like.
Interesting. I can totally see how that would come through. Not particularly my strong suit, but I don't know. Maybe I'll learn more about that as we go. But in terms of what happened to this business that you grew so quick, and you built up to what must have been quite a good number. Where did it go wrong for you, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. So here's where it went really off the rails. Is when you grow that quickly, you have to build a team, an infrastructure, whether that team is talent that you own, meaning they're employees, or it's talent that you rent, meaning they're independent contractors or freelancers. You need support. There's no way that I could produce on my own a six-figure project that's, where we're shooting in 9 cities across the country in 13 weeks. Can't do that. I need people, whether it's people to help plan or organize or book flights, or actually be there running the camera or editing and on the backside of things. You have to have people. And I like to say that business is really easy on its face. Like, create a solution to a problem and sell that to people with the problem. That's really easy. But where it all gets complicated as soon as people are involved. And there's always people involved at any sort of scale. And so where it all went wrong for us is I invited some co-founders into the business. There were 2 guys, they had complementary skill sets to my own. The problem was none of us had the maturity or the self-awareness to work through conflict in a productive way, to clearly articulate the vision that we had, to hold ourselves and one another accountable, again, in a healthy way. And so after a while, one of the co-founders, we actually booted out of the business within the first 4 months after formally forming, just because I saw him as a problem, as an obstinate stick in the mud. We've again repaired that relationship, and now I see how his strengths could have been an incredible asset to keep us out of a lot of trouble. But at the time, I saw him as an obstacle. And so what did we do? Remove the obstacle. And so I was left with myself and one other business partner. And where it all went wrong was in what we were trying to build, honestly. And it boils down to how we thought about our business and how we talked about our business. And so in its simplest form, when we sat down, we defined success in our organization, not in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of impact. And so success for us was we wanted to build, I'm based in Chicago, we wanted to build the best place to work in Chicago. And we knew that we would be the best place because we'd be featured in Crane's business. There would be write-ups in the local newspapers, and every creative in Chicago would know who we were. Every filmmaker in Chicago. And our premise was, our thesis was, if we can get the culture right, if we can build the best place, then we'll get the best talent. And if you have the best talent, then you get the best contracts. And suddenly you have a flywheel that's just throwing off cash. Our breakdown was in how we defined the best place to work. We're on opposite ends of the world.
What were yours and what were his then? Or
So
I should say, what was your other business partner's?
It was a him. Yeah, it was him. So for me, the best place to work was one where people could show up. They were properly resourced. They were given the tools that they needed. They were trusted to do their jobs in the ways that they saw fit. Where there was a culture of teamwork and camaraderie, and where people were challenged to do work that they didn't think they were capable of. Because those are things that I value. I want people in my corner who are saying, you can do more than you think. You're better at this than you realize. You're undervaluing your services. Ask for more. I value that. What my business partner valued, wanted to build, his idea of the best place to work. And he never said this expressly, never came out of his mouth, but actions speak louder than words, right? His idea of the best place to work was somewhere where he could show up, put in minimal effort, with zero accountability, and still pay his bills. And so you can probably see then the tension that starts to form when one person has the pedal pushed to the floor and is trying to accelerate as quickly as possible to attract the great talent, to build an empire, to really scale up a business. And the other is legitimately watching movies, taking a 2-hour lunch break every day to watch a film because their bills are getting paid. And why would they work that hard? And these things happened. Why they happened, how they happened, that's a more nuanced component to the story, of course. But functionally, we were building two different things. And you can't be in business, or expect any sort of reasonable returns if you and your founders or your leaders, or hell, even your team, are not aligned around what it is that you're trying to do. That is the most important thing. And I've been shocked in the work that I do now to see how few teams are functionally aligned. Many of them are not, and they have no idea what they're doing. And they're spinning their wheels, they're wasting resource, they're wasting time, which is your most valuable resource. And they're getting nowhere fast. The owners are getting frustrated. The great talent walks out the door because they're being underutilized. And so then you're left with a bunch of B and C talent who are really fine doing whatever mediocre job as long as they can pay their bills. And this is kind of the glut, the cycle that so many businesses fall into, simply because we're not building the same things and we're not clear about what we're even trying to build.
So predominantly it's conflict and lack of a common goal or common vision about what the business is. I can see, I don't necessarily think that the vision for both of you is wrong. I just think it's in opposite directions, right?
Well, that's right.
But
that's right, because you can build any kind of business you want. Like you can build a lifestyle. I have friends who build lifestyle businesses where they make between 150 and 200 grand a year, and they work with a bunch of VAs to do kind of their admin work, and they travel around the globe doing whatever it is that they do. That's fine if that's the kind of business you want to build. But if you want to build an organization that can have some oomph behind it, that can have systems that operate without you, that can maybe even live beyond your life. So as you move on to other things, the business can continue to operate. That's what I wanted to build. You can't have both though. You have to pick one or the other. And that's not a wrong answer. So there's no judgment either way. But I was married to, because that's what business partnerships are. I was in bed with someone who wanted something completely different. And how on earth was that going to work? And well, it didn't.
Well, it doesn't sound to me, unless I'm missing something, like you're particularly at fault. It's just, apart from perhaps, like you said, about picking the co-founders. So what happens then?
I'm a big believer in taking as much responsibility as you can. And so maybe I'm not, quote, at fault, but there were definitely signs that I missed, or things that I could have done differently. So my approach whenever conflict happened, whenever there was a difference of opinion, was to get really big, right? I'd raise my voice, I'd bring in a very assertive tone, and it was going to be this way. Well, that doesn't create the culture that I was on paper saying I wanted to build. Collaborative, empowered, And so that was a fault. That was a mistake, because when things started to feel out of control, I used my assertiveness and my personality to control them. But that's opposite of what we're trying to build, right? So that is a problem. When my co-founder was burning out, which he was burning out, like I found out later, that was the big problem. He wasn't taking these 2-hour lunch breaks just because. He just had a really low capacity for stress. And so as we were taking on more and more clients, it was overwhelming him, and he was burning out. And so he'd go and watch, a movie every day. And that's not an exaggeration. It was actually a movie every day for his lunch break. And that was his like respite. That was his way to recharge. But I didn't ask the questions to find out, you're burning out. Are you burning out? Do you have the resources that you need to continue to function in this role? Do we need to bring in somebody to help you with this? Are we looking at the tasks that you're being given versus your personality and capacity, the things that fuel you versus the things that drain you? Are we giving you more of the things that fuel you? Or are we just overloading you with the things that drain you? Which I was, by the way. And so that's at fault too. And so, well, it's like, it's not one single moment where it's like Bryce ruined everything. It seldom is, right? It's more the failure was the culmination of small moments where I failed to lead well. Because as a leader, your job really is one thing, and that's to serve the people who are on your team, to figure out how to give them a direction and then give them like block and tackle and resource them and give them every opportunity at success. And I didn't do that. I was saying, we're going here and you better step up or else. And that's not leadership. That's just being bossy. That's threatening. That's toxic. It's unproductive. And that's what I did. And so, no, there was no one moment where I like ruined it all, but there were definitely moments along the way where my failure to lead well, to lead with empathy, to realize that I was coming down on my team from a very heavy-handed way, to realize that my fears, my insecurities were flaring up and causing me to control rather than to create space to invite them in to let's solve this together collaboratively. Those were all areas where, yeah, I did get it wrong. And it culminated in burnout. Ultimately, that founder left the business. He was going to leave the business one way or the other. You know what I mean? And he moved out. When he did, it was very messy. A lot of our really great team left as a result. It kind of crippled us in that regard. I panicked. This was the beginning of the end. I panicked because now that we, had contracts that were unfulfilled that we had to execute on, and I didn't have the people to do it. So I rushed out and hired folks as quickly as I could. I hired some really bad people. They came in, just cultural bad fits. I didn't know what I was looking for. So I hired for skills instead of hired for human. Always hire for the human, not for the skills. You can teach the skills. That's easy. And before you know it, we were losing contracts. We were dropping the ball. Suddenly our clients didn't feel that friendly, warm, fuzzy feeling that they had felt for so long, and they took their business elsewhere. And I don't blame them. So no, there was no big one moment where all the fault lies with me. But if you're leading an organization, the buck stops with you. And so if it fails, it's on you, whether it's one grandiose bad business decision, or or like what happened to me, where it's a culmination of small infractions that add up to create a toxic work environment where you can't retain your people. It's still on you.
So does it make you think about, I'm interested to know what your business is now, but I'm also interested to know whether you would want to go back and do that again. And if you would, then, how differently would you act in those circumstances?
So where do you want to go first?
Yeah, I have learned actually that you are supposed to just ask one question at a time. I gave you three there. What are you
Well,
doing at the moment?
yeah. So now I'm helping leaders really avoid all the pain that I went through. So if you're the leader of a company, you're the owner of a company, you're the founder of a company, and you have big aspirations, you have to recognize the number one reality is that your biggest asset in your business is you. You're the biggest asset. You are your own greatest chance at success. But you also have to realize that you are your own biggest liability. Like if anything takes you down, it's not going to be from the outside, it's going to be you. And so leaders need that healthy dose, I think. And so what I'm doing now, the work that I'm really doing is focused on helping leaders find the alignment that we never had. So great, you've got your team, you have a vision, you're starting to hire in, or maybe you've been hiring in for a while and you're just stagnating. Like you're not seeing the forward momentum. It's likely because you're spinning your wheels, you're expending energy places where you're just not aligned. You're moving in different directions, exerting force and resource at a myriad of things instead of just one. And so a lot of our process is really just helping leaders understand, what are you trying to do here with this organization? And let's get you and the 5 people who are most influential in the business, whether they're your senior leadership team, or if you're a smaller team, your entire team, let's get you all to the table to have a conversation around what you're trying to do. And it's really an amazing process because I've done this hundreds of times. We call it the foundations process. It's like, let's get back to basics. Let's go down to the foundations. And we spent 3 weeks answering 5 questions. And they're really simple, obvious questions. And I'll give you the first one just because I like telling people about this. The first question that we asked is, what do you do? What do you do? Seems like an easy question to answer, right? We do X, Y, and Z. But what we find in almost 100% of cases is people are surprised by the answers that come out. People sitting around the table are like, oh, we do that? I thought we did this. You're like, guys, if we can't even answer that question, we're not even clear on what do you do here, we got to start there. And so, and I'm amazed. I mean, and by the way, everybody thinks, yeah, we know that. I know your listeners who are hearing this today are going to think like, well, clearly that's a bad company. That's not a company that's run very well. But I dare you to try it. Go and talk to the people on your team, write down your answer first, and then just go and ask them, what do we do here? Like, what do we really do here? And you'll find that there's usually a mismatch and sometimes a pretty severe one. So that's what we do now, is really just help leaders find that alignment first in thinking and understanding the organization, and then really in operationalizing what's most important to you. So we talk about values in organizations all the time. We're about excellence and integrity and honesty and honor, right? And they so often just become words on the wall in the foyer or in your handbook or on your website. And then we act completely contrary to those things. Like I did, where I said, I want to build a collaborative environment where everybody feels empowered. And then when things went wrong, I brought down the iron fist and was like, no, we're doing it my way. That's out of integrity with what we said we were about. And every time you act out of integrity, whether it's with a client or just in a small internal one-on-one, you are eroding confidence and trust in your business. And your A players will go and find other places because they believe what I believed, that, oh, it's just a terrible job. If I go find a different job, my life will be better. And it won't be, but you still will have to replace that A talent, and that good talent's hard to find. So that's really what we do, is just help these leaders get clear so they can scale up. And we've seen some amazing results. Like there was one, and not everything's a happy ending, by the way, but we've seen some incredible results where like one startup came to us and they wanted to really pioneer a new area of financial services. Like it hadn't been done. It was a nonprofit venture fund. Well, how do you do that? Like those are kind of on two ends of the spectrum. You have, capital guys over here who do the venture fund and make a ton of money. And then you've got nonprofits They're always begging for money. How do you have a nonprofit venture fund? And we went through this process with them. And by the way, the founder went kicking and screaming. He just had an advisor who said, you really should do this. And he told me later, he's like, I hate doing this. I hate talking about vision and mission and values. It's like such a waste of time. But he's a believer now. They went from wanting to raise money for a fund, for their nonprofit fund. They didn't know how to talk about it. They got clarity around it. And within 6 weeks, they were fully funded. They had found enough investors to fund their first year projection in 6 weeks, which was incredible. Another team, it was a tech startup, very cool platform that they were building. And they had been working on it for 14 months and were just spinning their wheels. They went through so many iterations. They couldn't go to market. There was always a problem. And we got into this work with them and realized that functionally, like in my experience, their two co-founders were building two different businesses. And so we were able to confront them with that fact and say, listen, you're not going to succeed in this business this way because you're going two different directions. And so one of the founders made the decision to leave the business with some equity. He left with some of the pie. He left the business, and in the 4 months after we had done that work, they were able to make more progress than they had in the previous 14 months and land their first 3 big clients, which actually made them money. They were in the black. They were actually making money now for the first time in 2 years, simply because we were able to come to the table and say, you're not clear. Clarity is paramount. And if we're not clear, man, we're done. And so that's the work that I do now, is really I just help leaders get out of their own way, find their blind spots so that they can achieve everything that they want to achieve, whatever it is.
Nice answer.
I've been practicing that one.
So the other part of my question was, do you ever look back and think, I'd want to go and do that again, perhaps differently?
Yeah.
You go ahead with that one. I got a follow up as well.
Yeah. It's when I tell people the story, especially other entrepreneurs who've been through similar things or can imagine themselves going through similar things, I kind of get that sympathetic, like, oh, wow, that's really hard. Good thing it's over. And the truth is, while I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, I'm really glad that I did go through it. I wouldn't want to do it again, by the way, like that way. But I'm glad that it happened because it showed me. Like I got to see my dark sides. I got to see my problem spots where I need to pay more attention, where I need to be cautious, where I have room to grow and improve and become more benevolent and kind with the people that I work with and who work for me. So while I wouldn't want to do it the same way, I do have aspirations to build a team again. It took some time off after we shut down the business and have done some soul searching, and this is how I've arrived where I have. And so over the last 2 years, I've been working in this capacity where I am now, helping leaders, just piloting programs and understanding, where do we want this to go? Like, do I want this to be more of a lifestyle? Do I want this to be more of an organization? And I do. I want it to be more of an organization. And so now, 22, this is laying the groundwork for rebuilding that team. How we build that team will be very, very different than the last time. And learned a lot about that.
Good. And I didn't pick up on something prior, so we're going back a little bit now. But the house that you moved into, or that was bare and was having work done on it, what was the outcome there in terms of? And you had news. Obviously, you had good news. What happened there?
Yeah. So I mean, the house. It's this house that I'm standing in now. It did come together. We do have it. We were able to retain it. We did go through some. I mean, honestly, you talk to any founder of any business, and you will hear a story of lean times, of hard times, and we had that. So There was the kind of the time in between finding a job, or being laid off from my steady, consistent job, and when the business really ramped up. And so like I said, was still looking for a job. I believed after I had been laid off that my next best plan was to go and get hired again. And I took a freelance contract with, again, somebody that I had known from that company who was also laid off the same time. She went and found another full-time job. She brought me in to do a little bit of work, reputation spread, introductions. And by the end of that year, I had replaced my corporate salary with freelance work, just, odd jobs here and there in my industry, which was a wonderful thing to be able to do. The year after was when we formally started, formally started building the business, which was an amazing thing. And yeah, that year was a 6-figure year,
I can be relieved now. Makes me feel better.
Yeah, we're all good. Everything, all's well that ends well. And now, I mean, I have an amazing kiddo. We actually have 3 now, and they were all home births. My wife wanted to do that. So they were born in this house, like actually in this home, which makes it even more special. So
the goals side of the conversation would you say your main goal is to build up an organization doing what you're doing now, or have you got some other things in mind?
Yeah. So I again, how we define success matters, right? This is unrelated to your exact question, but I was just introduced recently to someone, and they introduced me as a successful businessman. And that was a really odd thing for me because I'd never heard that before. Like, I don't feel particularly successful, but that's maybe because I'm looking at the wrong metric, or maybe the person who made the introduction is, right? Maybe they're looking at something different than I am. And so how you define goals and success really matters. If it's in terms of revenue, if it's in terms of number of employees, that matters. And the way that I'm choosing, because it's a choice, to define success for myself in this year moving forward is one of impact. And so by the end of 22, I want to help 100 founders, owners of businesses, leaders of businesses make substantial changes in their lives, in their businesses, so that they can level up and get to that next level, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, whether it's revenue goals, whether it's hiring and onboarding, whether it's succeeding the business, like handing it over to someone else, selling the business, growing the business, whatever it is, like whatever your goal is, you're your own biggest asset and biggest liability. And so I want to help 100 founders, owners, business leaders get out of their own way just a little bit more so that they can build the business that they want. So that's success for me. If I can do that with 100, I'm succeeding.
So are you a successful businessman or not?
Well, God, I got to be honest, Thomas. I've never been asked that question directly, and I don't know if I have a good answer for you. It's something this just happened yesterday, and I'm wrestling through it because this is an identity thing. And I guess let me say it like this. I guess the fact that I've been able to support myself, working for myself, pretty much my entire career, there's a success in that. But there's always more, right? There's always bigger and higher for the ambitious. And I think I'm kind of grinding up against that. So this is an area where I have some work to do. This is in how I see myself, right? So we're talking about self-awareness. How do I see myself? I mean, the story that I'm telling myself about me. Am I a success or not? And this matters because what changes as a result of seeing yourself differently? How would I act if I saw myself as a successful businessman? If I had, with a convicted yes, come back and said, absolutely. How would my life be different? I don't know. But let's catch up in 6 months and I'll tell you.
That'd be good, yeah. Is there anything that I should have asked you today?
That's a good question too. I don't know if there's anything that you should ask. But I will leave your listeners, I guess, with this is soft skills are not soft skills. The idea, if listen to Simon Sinek or Brene Brown, and they talk about these ideas of self-awareness, oftentimes they're presented as very soft and squishy around the edges. And they're also, by the way, presented in kind of binary fashion. Either you are self-aware or you are not. And I guess I would leave your listeners with this idea that it's a process, it's a journey, and it's really not about doing more. It's about looking at who you already are and finding the goodness in who you already are and learning to love that and live with that in a way that is productive. So I don't know if that made any sense at all, but it's important that it's not something to be achieved. It's a journey to go on, and just start going on it. Admit your shortcomings and own your successes, your big wins. And that's really, really helpful.
Bryce, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, so I'm really active on LinkedIn. So my name is Bryce Conlan, BryceCon, like Nancy, LAN, like Nancy. I'm really active on LinkedIn, and so that's a great way to connect with me directly. If you want to know more about the work that we're doing, you can visit us online at narrativeadvantage.com, and that's a great way to find us. You can see what we're doing there, and yeah, that's a great place to get plugged in.
Well, thank you for being a great guest, and I'll speak to you soon.
My absolute pleasure, Thomas. Thanks for having me.